значительным целям будем применять те средства, которые есть в нашем распоряжении, в том числе, я об этом тоже сказал, не исключаем и использование орешника по военным, по объектам военной промышленности, либо по центрам принятия решения, и в Киеве в том числе, в силе сопоставимо с применением ядерного оружия.
Putin threatens to use his most powerful missile on Ukraine. Understand the consequences. Putin threatens to use his most powerful missile on Ukraine, and the world is on high alert. In this video, we explain in detail the Russian president's statement and the possible impacts of this threat on the war between Russia and Ukraine. You will understand what the Sarmat missile, known as Satan II, is and how it can change the course of the conflict. What you will discover in this video. Why Putin is threatening to use one of the world's most lethal missiles. International reactions from the US, NATO and other countries. The consequences of a possible attack with this powerful weaponry. The global impact in terms of security, economics and geopolitics. This is the most critical moment in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Are we on the brink of a nuclear conflict? Watch until the end to understand all the scenarios and share your opinion in the comments. Don't miss it. Subscribe to the channel for more updates on the war in Ukraine and other global geopolitical topics. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which began in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea, escalated significantly in 2022 when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukrainian territory. Since then, the war has been marked by intense fighting, international economic sanctions and a devastating humanitarian crisis. In recent months, the scenario has become even more tense, with Russia facing significant challenges in its military operations. This has led President Vladimir Putin to adopt a more aggressive stance, including explicit threats to use high-impact weaponry. About Putin's most powerful missile. The missile in question is the Rs-28 Sarmat, known in the West as Satan II. This is an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, capable of carrying up to 10 nuclear warheads. It is designed to overcome anti-missile defense systems and reach any part of the world, with an estimated range of 18,000 kilometers. The Sarmat is considered a key piece in Russia's military arsenal and has often been mentioned as a strategic weapon to ensure the country's superiority in a possible global confrontation. Putin's threat. In his most recent statement, Vladimir Putin suggested that Russia could consider using Sarmat against targets in Ukraine if what he called existential threats to the country continued. This statement was seen as an attempt to dissuade the West from continuing to support Ukraine with advanced weaponry and military aid. Motivations for the threat. The motivations behind this threat can be attributed to several factors. Military pressure. Russia has faced difficulties in maintaining control of strategically important areas in Ukraine, especially after Ukrainian counteroffensives supported by Western weapons. Economic pressure. International sanctions are significantly affecting the Russian economy, increasing the need to demonstrate strength. Domestic politics. Putin faces growing dissatisfaction within Russia, and a threat like this could be seen as an attempt to reinforce his power among allies and the domestic public. International reactions. The global response to Putin's threat was immediate. The United States and its NATO allies strongly condemned the statement and reinforced their commitment to support Ukraine. Analysts warn that the use of Sarmat under any circumstances would be catastrophic, potentially triggering a global military response and bringing the world to the brink of nuclear war. On the other hand, countries such as China and India, which have maintained a more neutral position, have called for moderation and a return to diplomatic negotiations. Potential consequences. If the Sarmat missile were used in Ukraine, the consequences would be devastating. Local impact. Such an attack would cause mass destruction and countless deaths, creating an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Global military response. NATO is likely to respond militarily, increasing the risk of nuclear conflict. Global economic crisis. Global supply chains already affected by war would be further disrupted, resulting in inflation, food shortages, and instability in financial markets. Population displacement. Millions of people would be forced to flee, creating a refugee crisis on an even larger scale than today. About Putin's most powerful missile. The Rs-28 Sarmat, known as the Satan II, is one of the most advanced weapons in Russia's military arsenal. It is an intercontinental ballistic missile with a range of up to 18,000 kilometers, capable of carrying multiple nuclear warheads and overcoming anti-missile defense systems. Its modern design allows it to carry up to 10 individual warheads, each of which can hit different targets simultaneously. This capability makes Sarmat a weapon of strategic deterrence, designed to ensure that no country challenges Russia militarily without suffering serious consequences. The missile was developed to replace the R-36M, or Satan I, and began to be introduced into military operations in 2022. In addition to its range and destructive power, the Sarmat has adjustable flight trajectories that make it difficult to intercept, making it practically unbeatable in global war scenarios. Putin's threat. Recently, Vladimir Putin announced that Russia is considering using Sarmat if existential threats to the country persist. This statement was made following increasing international pressure and Western-backed military successes for Ukraine. Putin argues that Russia is being pushed into a position where extreme measures could be necessary to protect its national interests. However, experts believe that this threat is also a strategic move to create fear and divide the opinions of Ukraine's allies. Motivations for the threat. Demonstrate military power. Russia seeks to reinforce its position as a military superpower amid the losses suffered in the war. Diplomatic pressure. The threat may be an attempt to dissuade Western countries from continuing to supply weapons to Ukraine. Internal control. Within Russia, a show of force like this can be used to consolidate popular support and minimize internal criticism. International reactions. The threat drew sharp responses from international leaders. US and NATO both condemned Putin's statement and reaffirmed their commitment to the defense of Ukraine. Furthermore, they warned that any use of nuclear weapons would face a swift and decisive response. China and India, although they maintain a more neutral position, they called for moderation from all parties involved and highlighted the need for diplomatic negotiations to resolve the conflict. Potential consequences. If the Sarmat missile is used, the impact would be devastating, both locally and globally. Humanitarian impact. Thousands of lives would be lost instantly, and the affected areas would be uninhabitable for decades due to radiation. Geopolitical domino effect. Such an attack could lead to a global military escalation, including possible nuclear retaliation by NATO. Global economic crisis. Disruption of global markets and supply chains would result in severe inflation and shortages of essential resources such as food and fuel. Environmental threat. The use of nuclear weapons would have catastrophic consequences for the environment, affecting the climate and global biodiversity. Putin's threat highlights the dangers of a world where geopolitical tensions are reaching unprecedented levels. This situation requires a balanced approach, focusing on diplomacy and conflict prevention. However, as long as these threats persist, global uncertainty will continue to grow, requiring international vigilance and cooperation. The RS-28 Sarmat is a milestone in Russia's development of strategic weapons. Combining cutting-edge technology and unprecedented reach, it is designed to be a key player in the global balance of power. The missile uses advanced navigation systems that allow unpredictable trajectories, making it difficult for defense systems to intercept. Furthermore, its ability to carry multiple nuclear warheads with independent targets reinforces its deterrence potential. This weaponry is described by Russian military personnel as unstoppable and is often presented in Vladimir Putin's speeches as proof of Russia's technological superiority in the military field. International reactions. Global leaders responded to the threat with a combination of condemnations and calls for restraint. Nations allied to Ukraine, countries such as Germany, France and the United Kingdom reinforced their position of support for Ukraine, announcing new military and humanitarian aid packages. Neutral nations, countries such as Turkey and Brazil have offered themselves as mediators to reduce tensions, seeking a negotiated solution to the conflict. International organizations. The UN issued a warning about the risk of escalation and called on all parties to respect international treaties related to the use of weapons of mass destruction. Other aspects of the current scenario. In addition to nuclear threats, the war is intensifying on other fronts. The fighting is concentrated in strategic areas of Ukraine, with both sides seeking territorial gains. Russia continues to face stringent economic sanctions, while Ukraine receives sophisticated weaponry from Western allies. At the same time, Russian military mobilization, which includes the recruitment of civilians, has generated domestic discontent. Thousands of Russians have left the country to avoid conscription, while isolated protests erupt despite state repression. Reflection on the geopolitical situation. Russia's actions and global responses reflect a growing polarization in international relations. Putin's aggressive rhetoric, combined with the complexities of the conflict in Ukraine, highlights the challenges of maintaining stability in a multipolar world. About Putin's most powerful missile. The Rs-28 Sarmat, also called Satan II, represents one of Russia's greatest advances in military technology. It was designed to reinforce the country's position as a nuclear superpower, being a direct response to arsenal modernizations made by countries such as the United States. This missile is known for its ability to carry multiple warheads, hitting multiple targets simultaneously and precisely. Unlike previous weapons, it has trajectories that can bypass defense systems, making it a highly strategic resource. Construction of Sarmat began amid a period of rising tensions between Russia and the West, highlighting Moscow's intention to maintain an intimidating position on the global stage. Putin's threat. Putin's recent mention of the use of the Rs-28 Sarmat was made in the context of intensifying conflict in Ukraine. The Russian president justified his statements by arguing that Russia's territorial integrity and security are under constant threat. Behind this threat, there is a message for Ukraine's allies. An escalation of military support for the country could lead to unimaginable consequences. Russia, through this rhetoric, seeks not only a battlefield advantage but also a reconfiguration of global power dynamics. Motivations behind the threats. Strengthen the domestic image. Internally, the Russian government uses this rhetoric to reinforce the narrative of resistance against the West, justifying its military actions in Ukraine. Dividing allies. The idea of nuclear war is so feared that it may lead some nations to reevaluate their involvement in supporting Ukraine. Threatening in a strategic way, Putin knows that the mere mention of a weapon like Sarmat is enough to generate uncertainty and destabilize diplomatic discussions. NATO countries. Following the threats, NATO members called emergency meetings to discuss response strategies and new protection measures for their members. Financial markets. The sheer possibility of escalation has resulted in fluctuations in global markets, especially in the energy and food sectors. Civil society. Anti-war demonstrations were observed in several global capitals, with calls for nuclear disarmament and immediate peace negotiations. The escalation of conflict on the ground. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the war takes an increasingly complex turn. Ukraine, with the support of advanced technology and Western weaponry, managed to resist on several fronts and even recover strategic territories. On the other hand, Russia is intensifying its military efforts, increasing bombings of civil and energy infrastructure in Ukraine. This has generated an unprecedented humanitarian crisis, with millions of people displaced and essential systems paralyzed. The diplomatic dynamics. In the diplomatic arena, little progress has been made. Mediation initiatives, such as those led by neutral countries, are met with resistance from both sides, while global leaders struggle to establish a viable dialogue channel. War is not just a conflict between two nations, but also a struggle for power, influence and defining the rules of the international system in the 21st century.